Father Miguel had always felt a quiet calling in his heart, one that guided him long before he ever understood its meaning. Growing up in a small coastal town in Cebu, he spent his childhood surrounded by faith, music, and the simple warmth of community. His mother often said his voice was a gift from God, but he never imagined that someday it would lead him far beyond the walls of their humble parish. At 22, newly ordained and adjusting to his responsibilities, he found himself juggling sermons, confessions, youth ministry, and choir rehearsals. Yet whenever he sang during Mass, something indescribable happened. The church seemed to breathe differently, people grew still, and emotions filled the air. He didn't sing to impress but to comfort, to lift, to soothe. That purity made him beloved in the community. Still, he believed his voice belonged only to the church, not to the wide world beyond. Everything changed one warm evening after choir practice. The parish youth group, full of bright and bold personalities, gathered around him excitedly. They had been watching audition clips from America's Got Talent on their phones, shouting and laughing as different performances played. One of them suddenly said, "Father, you should audition. Your voice can reach the world." The whole group agreed instantly, cheering him on. He laughed the idea off, insisting priests weren't meant for television stages. But their insistence stuck with him. That night, after everyone had gone home, he stayed inside the quiet church. Candles flickered, and the scent of incense lingered. He knelt and asked God for guidance, wondering whether this unexpected idea was merely youthful excitement or a real calling. As he prayed, a gentle certainty grew within him. Maybe his voice could be a vessel beyond Sunday mornings. Maybe he could bring light to people far beyond his island. With his heart pounding, he recorded a simple audition video on his phone and submitted it, whispering a prayer before pressing send. Weeks later, while checking emails in the parish office, he froze. The familiar logo of America's Got Talent appeared at the top of his screen. His hands trembled as he opened the message. He had been invited to perform live in Los Angeles. The news spread across the parish like wildfire. People hugged him, cried, and prayed with him. The community came together in a way he had never seen before. Churchgoers donated money, families brought food to help him save for the trip, and elderly members slipped small envelopes into his hands saying, "Go with God, Father." For many of them, helping him felt like sending a piece of the Philippines to the world. He had never traveled on a plane before. When the day finally arrived, he wore his priest collar and carried only a small suitcase, his rosary, and a Bible. As he looked out the window during the flight, clouds swirling below him, he whispered, "Lord, guide me. I do this for you." Los Angeles felt enormous compared to the quiet town he came from. The crowds, the bright lights, and the fast pace overwhelmed him at first. At the AGT studio, performers of every kind filled the backstage area, dancers stretching, magicians rehearsing tricks, singers warming up. Standing among them, Father Miguel felt completely out of place, like he had stepped into a world he was never meant to belong to. Moments before he walked on stage, he closed his eyes and prayed softly, "Use me however you want. Let someone feel your love through my voice." When his name was called, he took a deep breath, stepped into the blinding lights, and faced an audience who had no idea that a quiet young priest from the Philippines was about to change their night, and the world, with a single song. When Father Miguel stepped out onto the stage, the audience grew completely silent. The bright lights warmed his face as he adjusted the microphone with slightly trembling fingers. He could feel thousands of eyes watching him, trying to understand why a young priest, dressed in a simple black clerical shirt, was standing where pop stars and dancers usually performed. Simon raised an eyebrow, curious. Heidi gave him an encouraging smile. Sophia and Howie leaned forward, sensing something different. When he introduced himself and explained he had come all the way from the Philippines to share a song God placed in his heart, a soft murmur passed through the crowd. There was no gimmick, no fancy setup, just a priest with a message in his voice. The music began gently, a slow piano intro that felt like a heartbeat. His original song, "Light for the Broken," flowed out of him with an emotion so raw that the audience instantly leaned in. His voice wasn't just beautiful, it carried something deeper, sincerity, compassion, and a quiet power formed by years of singing in church. As he sang about pain, hope, and faith, the camera captured faces in the audience beginning to change. A woman in the front row wiped tears. A teenage boy put his hand on his chest. A couple held hands more tightly. His voice rose higher, filling the theater with a warmth that felt almost like prayer. Even Simon, who rarely showed emotion, seemed moved. When the final note ended, there was a moment of stillness, like everyone needed a second to breathe again. Then the entire theater erupted into applause. People stood, shouting his name. Father Miguel brought a hand to his chest in disbelief, tears forming. The judges looked stunned. Howie said he felt healed just by listening. Simon said, "You didn't perform tonight, you transformed this room." But it was Heidi who placed her hands on the golden buzzer and slammed it with conviction. Golden confetti rained down as Father Miguel knelt on the stage, overwhelmed and crying, feeling as though the heavens had opened. Backstage, producers hugged him. The clip of his audition went viral overnight, reaching millions across the world who felt touched by his pure sincerity. As episode 4 begins, Father Miguel's life changes in ways he never expected. News channels in the Philippines and the US broadcast stories about the singing priest of hope. Social media exploded with messages from people saying his voice helped them through depression, grief, or loneliness. His parish back home gathered around televisions and phones, celebrating with pride. Children jumped excitedly, shouting his name. Elderly women cried tears of joy during morning prayer. But fame brought challenges too. Some questioned whether a priest should be on a show like AGT. Articles appeared online with mixed opinions. Critics argued he should remain focused on church duties. Supporters countered that his voice was a ministry of its own. Hurt but never shaken, Father Miguel responded with humility. "I sing not for fame," he told an interviewer, "but to remind people that God has not forgotten them." As the quarterfinals approached, pressure grew heavier. He practiced for hours, refining his performance while still attending Mass, praying daily, and calling his parish to reassure them he remained faithful to his responsibilities. On the night of his quarterfinals performance, he stood backstage listening to the roar of the crowd. His heart pounded. The world expected something extraordinary from him again. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered a quiet prayer. Stepping on stage, he began singing Amazing Grace, blending English and Cebuano in a hauntingly beautiful arrangement that captured both his roots and his message. The theater swelled with emotion. When he reached the final note, the audience rose in another standing ovation. Sophia said she felt like she had just witnessed a miracle. Simon told him he had the rare ability to touch souls with his voice alone. And as Father Miguel walked off stage, he knew this journey was bigger than any competition. He was reaching hearts across the world, one song at a time. As the semifinals approached, Father Miguel felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The AGT stage, which had once felt like an unexpected blessing, now felt like a massive responsibility. Every interview, every rehearsal, every message from supporters reminded him how much people believed in him. Back home in the Philippines, his parish lit candles every night and prayed for his strength. Kids from the youth choir sent him videos cheering him on, and elderly members of the church told him they watched his performances on replay whenever they felt lonely or sick. Their love encouraged him, but it also made him emotional. He didn't want to disappoint them, not the people who donated their savings to send him to America, not the strangers who said his voice brought them peace, and certainly not God. He chose, "You Raise Me Up," for his semifinals performance because it reflected everything he felt: gratitude, humility, and hope. During rehearsals, he struggled at moments, overwhelmed by memories of those who had supported him through difficult times. He remembered his mother praying over him during storms, his father working long hours to provide for their family, and the community that helped raise him. When the night arrived, he stood backstage in silence as other performers hyped themselves up. He held his rosary tightly, whispering a prayer for courage rather than victory. Once he stepped onto the stage, the audience welcomed him with cheers, but his heart was racing. The spotlight hit him, and a stillness settled over the room. The first note came out soft, trembling with emotion. But as he continued, his voice grew stronger, filled with a depth that came from lived struggles and unshakable faith. Midway through the song, a wave of emotion hit him so hard that tears formed in his eyes. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from authenticity. The crowd reacted instantly, moved by the vulnerability in his performance. By the final chorus, he sang with his whole heart, raising his voice powerfully toward the heavens. The audience rose to its feet before the last note even ended. Sophia placed her hand over her heart, visibly emotional, and said he sang the way a person loves, with sincerity. Howie called him a spiritual experience, and Simon said he had a gift that transcended music. When the votes were revealed and Father Miguel advanced to the finals, he couldn't hold back his tears of gratitude. He knelt on the stage, thanking God quietly, knowing his journey was touching more lives than he had ever imagined. As the finals approached, the pressure was unlike anything he had experienced. Cameras followed him, reporters asked for interviews, and producers encouraged him to choose a song that defined him. After much reflection and prayer, he decided to perform another original piece titled, God Walks With You. He wanted it to be a reminder to every person struggling, whether with illness, loss, loneliness, or fear, that they were not alone. On the night of the finals, the theater was packed, buzzing with excitement. A choir stood behind him, and soft golden lights bathed the stage in warmth. When the music started, a hush fell over the entire room. His voice entered gently, almost like a whisper carried on a breeze. The melody wrapped around the audience like comfort, and his lyrics spoke directly to the soul. Each line carried a message of strength, resilience, and divine love. The choir joined him in harmony, creating a moment that felt bigger than the show, bigger than entertainment. It felt sacred. By the time he reached the final note, many in the audience were crying, judges included. The applause that followed was thunderous, lasting longer than any of his previous performances. Even though he didn't win the AGT title, the crowd's reaction made it clear, he had won something far more meaningful. After the show, record labels reached out, churches from all over the world invited